So right now, if someone came up to you, someone who was 24 years old, and said, "Give me your honest opinion. Do you think I should have children?" What would you tell them? And then the second part is, there's a lot more to ask you about what's going on with climate change in the future, but at the end, the real question is going to be, what are the most important specific actions individuals and governments can do? If we could convince the government to make changes and could convince society to make changes, what is your list of the most powerful things that would prevent these worst case scenarios and give a different future?
I have a few ideas on that. First of all, I have a fifth grandson due April 30th. Thank you. And I've thought this very thing about what kind of world my grandchildren are growing up in and what kind of future they'll have, if they'll have a future. So it's a pretty dire situation. About 30 years ago, I was covering the construction of a garbage burning plant, an incinerator. We used to call them incinerators. Now we call them waste to energy plants. And, it's been the American way to find that black box solution. Don't reduce the amount of garbage we make. Don't reduce the packaging. Don't go for the root problem, but build something that will take care of it. That, of course, is going to create other problems as well, like toxic ash and dioxin coming out of the smokestack. I don't know if there's a black box solution to this. I mean, President Trump did mention recently he's got an idea on that. We can all have faith in that one. But, my idea, my little kind of thing that I bat around in my head is we have to instill in the society, ingrained in the bones, a sense of conservation. We have to use the least amount possible, the least amount of energy, the least amount of water, the least amount of packaging. We have to reuse things. We have to change fundamentally the way we live and the way we think. And I have always had a very strong environmental streak. I was originally an environmental reporter, went on to be an investigative reporter and social issues and so forth. And I tried to instill my children with this idea of saving things, of turning out lights. And I can't say I made a lot of headway because there were so many forces working against me. This is a huge problem. This is a market problem. It's capitalism run amok at its worst. We got to change that. That's not a solution, it's a statement, but that's what we have to do.
Kids, I think that's obviously an extremely personal question. I would never make any blanket statement and say, don't have kids. Although I've chosen not to have kids, and several of the scientists I interviewed for this book, one of whom I read about this morning, knowing what they know about what's happening with what they're studying, have chosen not to have kids because they didn't want to bring them into a world of what they saw coming. Definitely the single biggest thing any one of us can do to lower our carbon footprint is to not reproduce. That said, I would not ever tell anybody to not have a child, and they might be bringing someone into the world that we're going to need, who's going to do something that we're all going to need, the world's going to need. That said, it would, I think, need to be a really, really conscious decision, and with the full understanding that they're going to have to help that child survive in a world that looks nothing like the world looks right now. It's going to get extremely hard everywhere, not just the places where it's challenging right now. So assuming that responsibility. And then, if we had proper global government reactions to the crisis that's upon us, they would not be talking about, oh, by 2030, we're going to reduce our emissions down to 1990 levels or anything like this. It would be kind of a globally coordinated government response akin to what you'd see in a sci-fi movie when nasty aliens are about to take over the planet and eat all the humans. Like that kind of immediate banding together for our own survival, because that is how far along we are in this crisis. The methane is already releasing from thawing permafrost. It's already releasing dramatically in subsea areas of the Arctic. From there, literally methane bombs are starting to slowly release. And so that with irreversible melting happening, probably already on the western Antarctic ice sheet, what we saw in Greenland this last summer, where one of the leading Greenland scientists said, we're losing Greenland. It's essentially now on the way out. And the question is, how long is it going to take? When this is coming from top scientists, then it would only make sense to have governments that are doing things like, okay, we're getting off fossil fuels immediately, and we are going to start relocating coastal cities immediately, and then doing toxic remediation of places in those coastal cities of what's happening, according to what's coming. And instead, like just using this country as an example, again, going back to Florida, just south of Miami on the coast is Turkey Point Nuclear Power Plant, and it's at 6 feet sea level. And instead of decommissioning the plant, which would take years, and getting ready to clean up the site, they're adding another nuclear reactor. So that's what this country's doing in some places. And we need to be relocating people, and that's what, for example, Dr. Harold Wanless, just to give you an idea to hold up against the inactivity of this government and the Obama administration as well, not just this one. But sea level rise expert Harold Wanless says, look, right now, if I was in charge, I would be relocating the entirety of South Florida. That means archives, museums, hospitals, schools, everything needs to be moved to higher ground. The government is the only organization big enough that could control, manage, and fund it. And those people need to be moved somewhere higher up into the United States. Obviously, that means jobs, housing, food, et cetera. And then remediating all the toxic waste areas that are going to be left in South Florida. Because if you just look at the sea level rise maps as he has produced and shows in his slideshows, basically with projections of sea level rise, he said we could see easily as much as 10 feet before 2100, when the entirety of South Florida starts to look more like the Keys do now. The Keys are, of course, long gone by then. So knowing that's what's upon us, and that's what's essentially already baked into the system, and then hold that up to how governments are responding. Even some of the better governments in the EU, it's still laughable, the level of response that we're seeing today.
Well, I would counsel that young person to, if you like children and want to be a parent, do go ahead and raise one or two or how many children you want, but make sure that you raise them to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, as the old saying would go. Raise them with feeding them healthy, organic food so that they are healthy, they'll grow up strong and won't be using health resources of the health system. Raise them to have ecological consciousness and social consciousness so that they want to help other people, so they will help support organic farmers and maybe even become organic farmers or become environmentalists, because we need more people that have the big picture. Teach them transcendental meditation so they are healthy and coherent within their psychologies and their minds, and they can radiate more coherence. Make sure that you raise people that are going to be creating a positive influence, because we need problem solvers too. And So if people have that kind of vision themselves, then they should have children in whom they can instill that vision, because we need to pass forward wisdom and social consciousness and environmental consciousness.